let's go back to some of your previous training before cybersecurity and talk about that mindset. How do you find the sort of what you're calling the outside the box mindset? Often we call it the try harder mindset.
Mhm.
How do you find learning that compared to some of your previous experience with the Air Force or even before that? Did you find that that was like a big adjustment for you, or do you feel like you had the mental training beforehand?
It somewhat in a weird way translates
Hmm.
because with me being a combat search and rescue loadmaster, um, not everything is there's not always an answer in the book.
Yeah.
And there were many times where I had to think outside the box in the aircraft in order to find a solution um, to get the mission done. And spending my time in the Air Force has translated somewhat, not necessarily in the technical aspect, but in that mindset aspect of, okay, well, this didn't work. What else can I do?
Hmm.
There's never essentially quit is never an option.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's always another path that may not be um, apparent to you in that moment, but if you sit down and try and think what else is there, that path might be uh, opened up to you as you think of the situation in different ways.
Yeah, wow. I'm not surprised at all. I think that there are a lot of different fields that do translate martial arts, and I imagine combat, anything that has you pitted against an intelligent adversary,
Mhm.
something like chess. All of these domains have similar types of thinking. So yeah, you're expressing a lot of what we would hope our students do. So that's really great. Um, is there anything that you would say to students without that background, um, in terms of like how to develop it? Because it's pretty hard to go from not really having that way of thinking to uh, first convincing yourself that that's the right way to think and then doing it consistently. Do you have any advice on how to cultivate that?
I would say make it deliberate. Like if
Mm,
you're seriously stuck at a wall in anything, and not necessarily offensive securities or a course, but anything, if you hit a wall somewhere, take a step back and think about the whole situation, not just what you see in front of you. Look for the bigger picture because what could be what you might think is, hey, I have this, for example, password hash that I found on this machine, but it doesn't work on anything here. Again, broaden your scope and think, okay, where else can I use that kind of deal?
mm.
You know what I mean? Because we're all humans. Humans make mistakes, and that's where we are here to try and find those mistakes. And it does take that sometimes that broader scope in order to see something that you're not necessarily seeing. So taking a step back and making it a deliberate thing of walking away from the computer and thinking on it in a different mind or a different point of view. And some people it may take physically looking at it a different way to where moving around
Mhm.
can help jog um those that thinking power. Like for me, I will get up and walk away,
Yeah.
and just walking around thinking every once in a while I'll have that moment of that, let me try that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will either may not give me the right or the answer I'm looking for, but it might give me an answer that might help me later down the road, or it might show me that path that I didn't see initially.
Yeah, you're so right, Stephen. I can't tell you the number of times where I was, banging my head against the wall and got fed up and walked away. And as soon as you turn your back from the computer, there's like a magical property where you're like, oh,
Hmm.
that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let's stay on the topic of mindsets for a second. So there's what you're calling the out of the box mindset,
Hmm.
or the try harder mindset. But then there's also the adversarial mindset, thinking like an attacker, thinking like a
Hmm.
like a bad guy. How did you develop that, and how do you see it translate into your OffSec experience?
For me, it was a bit of a challenge thinking adversarially,
Mhm.
only because I was up until the taking your or being in your guys' course, I'd always do CTFs.
Right.
And CTFs versus going after productions are two totally different things, in my
Mm.
opinion, because a CTF is purposely designed to be vulnerable, it's purposely designed to be found, whereas in a production level, they may not have intended to coded it that way.
Hopefully not.
And it takes, again, critical thinking on being able to sit down, recode, or poke around in an application and see, okay, well, this is how this works. Let me try this and see if I can get something that the company or the developers didn't intend to happen.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the adversarial mindset comes in, is whenever you start thinking about, well, what can I do to circumnavigate what the developers had set forth?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned before we started recording that you did a skills assessment just yesterday. Tell us a little bit about that and what that. First of all, what do you mean by skills assessment? What was that for? And
So
how did the PWK experience or the OffSec experience with Learn One help you with it?
yes, so for me, I enrolled in November of last year in the Learn One subscription, and before then, I'd always have issues, even CTFs, going in and finding those paths, or what would be uh, attack vectors
Mhm.
going into an application, and I would spend hours just trying to get a foothold into anything. Last night I had a skills assessment for potential job employment,
Cool.
getting my first job as a pen tester and as a security, or it would be technically a security engineer, where I would be doing vulnerability assessments and exploitations.
Nice.
I had 4.5 hours on their cyber range on what was called their marketplace,
Okay.
essentially. And within 4.5 hours, I was able to exploit successfully 7 vulnerabilities. And towards the end of it, I had already identified another 3 that I was working on trying to exploit.
Wow.
And for me to go from spending days not getting a foothold to, in 4.5 hours, identifying 10 and exploiting 7, that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, that's really
And
impressive.
yeah, and that's where the a lot of it came from the Pen 200, is because it, again, taught me how to dig and think differently. And there's a period in there during my assessment where I was going for like the low hanging fruit and the easy finds, but then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't know where else to go from here. And that's where, again, got away from my computer, took a step back, walked away, came back, sat down after about 5 minutes, and it hit me like a freight train. There's another attack vector right there. And there's another one. And in the last, I would say, hour and a half, 2 hours, I was able to get the last few exploits
Nice.
to perform. So that's where, again, as you guys call it, the try harder mindset, that's where it really came into play for me. And again, looking at situations in different scenarios in different ways and being like, okay, how can I break this? How can I do what the developer did not want me to do? And that's where it paid off for me.
That's really great, Stephen. Best of luck with that job interview. It sounds like you really aced it though. That's awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you have any home lab set up or projects or anything that you're working on sort of outside of the offset curriculum to build your skills?
Yes. So I have my computer. I have the hardware to do it. So I've set up an Active Directory lab.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. So I have a domain controller and 2 workstations essentially attached to the domain controller, where I will go in and practice different things, like capturing password hashes using Responder, getting used to Bloodhound and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I use that to supplement the OffSec training.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So it helps build the skills and build upon the foundation that is the Pen 200. So it's
Yeah, that's
definitely
amazing.
helpful.
One of my mentors here at OffSec has always said, like, you can take all the training in the world, but if you don't go and build something yourself and then break it, you're kind of gimping yourself, because then you're not giving yourself the full experience of, hey, how do I build this from scratch, and then how do I break it? So that's awesome to hear that you're already doing that.
Yep.
Um, Okay, what did you accomplish either in the training or outside of the training that you didn't previously think was possible for you?
Honestly, it would be the rate that I'm learning and improving.
Yeah.
as as previously stated, like just from November of last year till now, went from such a drastic change to where things are starting to click. I'd say that would be the biggest accomplishment for me, because prior to the OffSec courses, um, I've been studying for almost 2 years,
Hmm.
and I'd always had that struggle. And the biggest thing that I've taken away from the Pen 200 and Pen 100 is the mindset and the methodology behind it.
Hmm.
It's drastically helped me out.
That's fantastic. All right, my last of the main questions here. What do you envision for yourself once you've completed Pen 200 and the OSCP exam?
Ultimately, I would love to be able to get into a career or into the field
Hmm.
as a pen tester or a red teamer eventually, or even just as a security engineer, just to get in and start putting those skills to use. It's been definitely a drive for me just to get in and get going, um, because it's something that I do enjoy. This isn't just something of I'm going to do it as like a job and just make the money. I'm in it for the passion, because
Mhm.
I will I spend late nights on either the offset courses, on Hack the Box, or even in my own lab environment, just trying out different things. And eventually, I want to be able to do that and use those skills to actually help people out.
That's awesome, Stephen. Um, I think I probably know this answer based on the conversation so far, but if you had to pick a path to go, would you be more interested in the website or the networky Active Directory side?
I would say probably web app.
Oh yeah, okay. That wasn't what I was
Oh,
expecting. So
yeah. Because like networking, there are the challenges like with Active Directory and stuff like that,
hmm.
but there's only so much you could do with the Active Directory side. Whereas web app, it's completely up to the creators and how they develop it,
Hmm.
and that's where you can see the creativity of humans, but also you can also see where a lot of vulnerabilities can come out of that.
Yeah.
And even to this day, you see creative exploits come down the pipe through the news, and you're like, man, I never would have thought about doing that. That's pretty awesome. Like, that's good that they found that vulnerability. And it's really creative on how they do it.
I love that perspective. That's really cool. Okay, so we're just about finished. I do have some rapid fire questions for you. You can use as few or as many words as you want to answer these ones.
Okay.
So, well, this one is one word. What one word would you use to describe OffSec?
Fun.
Cool. What's the best thing about learning penetration testing?
Uh, the challenge. Honestly,
Okay.
everything. There's no same situation.
Yeah,
It's
definitely. It
it.
changes so often.
Oh yeah. Even day to day, the different technologies that are coming out, not just in the computer world, but in IT in general. We now have, for example, like Elon Musk set up an entire satellite system for internet. Like that's going to open up a whole nother avenue of attack vectors
Hmm.
coming down the pipeline once that's fully set up and running, if people aren't already trying to test that environment out now.
Yeah. Um, what's an underrated soft skill?
Communication.
Huh. I
That
wouldn't say it's underrated. Yeah, it's super
well,
important.
it's not. I should say like it's definitely highly rated, but it's also, from what I've seen from like people on Twitter and through LinkedIn, is a lot of people don't have that skill.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Being able to sit down as a penetration tester or as a red teamer, like, and being able to communicate in a empathy kind of mindset towards the developers, because you don't want to go in and say, all right, look, I found these vulnerabilities, this is terrible. It's, hey, look, I know you guys, like, this is like being able to not really be too harsh on developers, because they do try very hard and build their products. And a lot of people have a lot of passion towards the products that they build, and you don't want to be able to communicate in the wrong way and come off as rude or
Mhm.
anything of the sort. It really does take um a communication skill to be able to um pass off those vulnerabilities without causing like either bad blood between your company and their company. It really does take some thought
Mhm.
into what you're going to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No question about that. Communication is definitely. I think everyone agrees. Oh yeah, this is important. How do you actually do it? How do you make sure that you're communicating properly to different audiences,
Hmm.
management, client, technical managers? Yeah, it's hard. It's definitely
Yeah,
hard. What's the most important quality a student should have?
the drive. You'd absolutely have to be willing to have the self discipline to go in and constantly go after it, especially if you're in a rut on you're struggling on a certain topic. Being able to have that drive to try harder and keep going,
Hmm.
that's a really big thing.
Yeah. What do you think a common misconception is about getting started in cybersecurity?
I don't know if there's any like off the top of my head a common misconception of, at least from everyone that I've talked to. It's bigger than what people think.
Hmm.
It's not just you have the security guys sitting there watching over IT guys, making sure that they don't purposely code in a vulnerability. It's the aspect of being able to again communicate to the non-technical people, and then also the people that will sit down and actually write documents on this.
Mhm.
Like, believe it or not, there are people out there that may not have really any experience in cybersecurity, but they are able to communicate the importance of certain events in the world
Right.
and being able to express that to people.
Mhm. What hobbies do you have that are unrelated to cybersecurity?
I play Dungeons and Dragons
Awesome.
and also do play some video games as well.
Nice. Any particular genre?
For video games, it's mainly first-person shooter survival games.
Nice. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Don't quit.
Nice.
It's whenever I was in basic training, I had those moments of very tough struggles to where I thought about like I can't do this,
Mhm.
but my MTI, my military training instructor, the first words that ever came out of his mouth when from the first day that we met him to our graduation was always don't quit. And to this day I carry that with me because no matter how hard things get, whether it's life, cybersecurity, hacking, anything, as long as you don't quit, you will always be able to continue.
That is indeed fantastic advice. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else you want to say or anything you want to ask me?
Oh no, that's all I got. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure and an honor.
All right, then until next time, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you.